Welcome. Let's get started. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. I think we have all seen the introductory slide and we can hopefully start soon. Yes, here we are. There'll be more people join us in the process. This is the first Open Consultation Monday that Fox recently launched this series, and we hope to establish it as a regular venue, space for exchanges, open exchanges in every respect, meaning openly expressing our views, but also sharing publicly what we're saying with the courage of our conviction, and also with a problem-solving approach, hopefully. We're not here to disagree for the sake of disagreeing or to make a point without listening to the others, but to hopefully discuss difficult issues with a view to finding a way forward or contributing to a way forward. So thanks a lot for coming. It's also an opportunity for various Fox networks or people related to Fox and partners to come together without going through the specific networks meetings, which are often closed. So we have here some former UN colleagues with whom we have the Peacemaking Reflection Group of former UN system staff, PRG network, some colleagues from the Global South Perspectives Network, some colleagues from the Coalition for the UN We Need network of civil society. So it is an opportunity for various groups to come together around an issue that hopefully interests us all. To set the stage, we don't have set speakers, so after my brief introduction, please feel free to raise your electronic hand, and then we'll get started in the order of your request. So what I wanted to say is, why did we choose this topic to start with? A very difficult topic about Israel, the UN and Gaza. It is definitely occupying our screens and our minds, and gives us a sense of hopelessness and helplessness that we cannot influence, freeze the situation, whatever, get it reversing and creating a virtuous cycle, if we can, out of this vicious cycle of confrontation. But the problem, of course, is not new. The current war maybe have been caused in response to the 7 October 2023 attack by Hamas on southern Israel and the horrific killing of about 1,200 people and the abduction of about 250 people. But of course, the disproportionate response afterwards, the destruction and the killing in Gaza and subsequently also in Lebanon, the exchanges between Israel and Iran of missiles, and the participation even of Yemen, etc., make this a complicated dispute for the region and the world. But at the core of it is there is the need for two peoples to feel secure and assert their own traditions and also their connections to the land of broader defined Palestine. The two-state solution is something that has been proposed in the past already from the UN. The partition of Palestine was not accepted by all in 47, 48, but now we're going back to it always as a way to end the killing and ensure that the two peoples live together side by side in peace, prosperity, and dignity. But how to get there while all this is happening, and we can see a lot of bad intentions from all sides, and once one side has more means to materialize its intentions, then it can be that side that we criticize more, but doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of bad blood and there isn't a lot of hopefully also positive potential for this part of the world. That's about it from me to start with, and you are welcome to contribute. Thanks a lot for being here again with us. We have about 90 minutes. Peter Ford, who has been working with UNRWA in the past. Yes, an ambassador of the UK to the region before that. Thank you, Peter, for being here.
Thank you, Georgios, for giving me this opportunity. As some will know, I worked for 8 years for UNRWA in the capacity of advisor and representative of the Commissioner General. And in that capacity, I visited Gaza and the West Bank many, many times. I've seen on the ground how vital the work of UNRWA is, and especially how indispensable UNRWA is in the fields of education and healthcare. So as the present Commissioner General has said in a statement today, the international community is losing sight of the children. What is unique about UNRWA is that it provides education for the children. In the case of Gaza, about 300,000 children and 50,000 on the West Bank. So if UNRWA collapses or is not allowed to work, these children will go for a second year and maybe indefinitely without education. This cannot be allowed to happen. In some quarters of the international community, there is discussion of substitutes. Maybe other UN agencies could fill gaps. This might, to some extent, be true of food, for example, because we have the World Food Programme. Though even there, the UNRWA warehouses are essential. The UNRWA distribution network, the UNRWA labor force, which supports all the other major international agencies operating in Gaza and the West Bank. But it's in the field of education and healthcare in particular that UNRWA is absolutely vital, and to stop operations in this area would be an act of absolute barbarity. It's almost unimaginable that the international community could allow this to happen. Fortunately, those member countries of the UN which do have a conscience, or at least so far 52 of them, have signed a letter, not specifically about UNRWA, but about the situation generally, calling on the Security Council to implement serious measures against Israel for its barbaric practices in Gaza, and to implement an arms embargo. Therefore, in terms of action, I can only advocate for more action of this kind, international committees, petitions, attempts to, or moves towards suspending Israel's membership of the United Nations. After all, when a member state refuses cooperation with an agency, and in the circumstances which have already been defined legally by the UN's own ancillary legal bodies, then it's quite reasonable to consider the suspension of a country's membership. Finally, I would point out a potential practical consequence of Israel's action. Remember the old Chinese saying, "Be careful what you wish for." Well, if UNRWA was not there to educate 300,000 children who might, at a later stage, step into the breach, well, the Hamas-run administration. Regardless of what happens to the Hamas military organization, even if Israel succeeds in dismantling the Hamas military, still they cannot dismantle an ideology and the people who support what Hamas stand for. There will be some form of administration ultimately, regardless of what Israel does on the battlefield. And at the moment, the situation is that 55% of Gaza children are educated by the Hamas administration. As in the case of UNRWA, I think it's impossible for those schools to run in the normal way. But what will happen if there's no UNRWA is that the local administration would take over the education. So if that is what Israel and the international community want, for Hamas to take over the entire education of the entire educational cohort, then so be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And of course, you referred to the recent decision by the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, to declare UNRWA a terrorist organization. UNRWA is the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, which is not only active in Gaza, but also in Lebanon, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Jordan and Syria, I believe, right? So, and of course, it has been accused in the past, some of its 13,000 or so employees in Gaza who are local staff, usually that some of them are Hamas sympathizers, or even a few participated in the 7 October attacks. But the UN has dealt with it, has investigated. I think less than 10 people were fired, and there were no indications that there were more than that were involved or anything. But yeah, there is a Knesset decision, which is a unilateral decision by one country, which is the occupying power, to get rid of a UN agency in a way, right? So what you were saying is a reaction to that. Yes, did I misread anything? But then we'll go to Frank. Peter, if you want, if I try to explain something and I didn't explain properly, please. No, okay. Frank?
Well, thank you, Yorgos, and hello, everybody. I'll be very, very brief. Two things. It's good to know who your friends are and who the people are that you cannot trust. Now, I've always considered myself to be part of the Western world. And, you know, from people like Bertrand Russell to even Mikhail Gorbachev, who spoke out against nuclear weapons and wanted to have them all, you know, abandoned, destroyed. We now have a resolution by the General Assembly a couple of days ago for a scientific study on the effects of nuclear war. Now, it's been done before a long time ago, but not updated. And the point about this updating was to bring into the equation the severity of climate change and how it would actually play out in that regard. And 144 countries adopted the resolution or supported it. 3 did not. And the 3 who did not are apparently France, the United Kingdom, and the Russian Federation. The Americans abstained, and the Chinese actually supported the resolution. So we have a world which is changing very quickly, as Jeff Saxon's article on BRICS pointed out recently. So I just wanted to say, gee, I would have thought that all of the permanent 5 countries would have supported a study like this. And to think that 3 of them have not, one of whom has been regularly threatening the use of nuclear weapons, is absolutely appalling. The second thing I wanted to mention is just to say that, as some of you may know, on the 17th of July, the Knesset in Israel rejected the establishment of a Palestinian state, destroying in Israeli law any prospect of the 2-state solution, it would seem. But on the same day, former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and a Palestinian former Foreign Minister Nasser al-Kidwa, who is a nephew of Yasser Arafat, made a joint declaration advocating the 2-state solution. So my question to everybody here is, what do you think about the Olmert al-Kidwa determination? They are going around the world talking to people. They were in London lately at a conference organized by Haaretz, in fact, and they have already met Pope Francis in Rome. What is the view on the Olmert Al-Qidwa declaration, considering, firstly, Olmert has his own checkered history, both in terms of Gaza over a decade ago, and also in terms of having had to serve 1.5 years in jail for corruption. But Al-Qidwa is, as far as I know, this is the first time recently that a serious Palestinian actor who has apparently the support of Marwan Barghouti and Hanan Ashrawi, by the way, but is, as it were, up against Abu Mazen, Abbas. I would think that this should be given a lot of importance. And my suggestion, as some of you know, is that this is something which the Secretary General should probably take some initiative on and try to keep this two-state solution on the cards, and at least as an important consideration for diplomacy around the current crisis, which of course is the war in Gaza, the war against Lebanon, and the missile attacks on Israel itself from Hamas, Hezbollah, and more recently from Iran. I'll stop there, just wanting to hear what people think of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. I worked a bit with Ambassador Al-Qidwa when I was serving in the Division for Palestinian Rights of the Secretariat, and he was a permanent representative of Palestine to the UN at the time. And there is this Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, and they'll be also meeting again, organizing events around the 29th of November, like every year, Solidarity Day with the Palestinian people. And I hope this plan or declaration, as you said, Olmert Al-Qidwa, gets discussed also there. Anybody who would like to offer their views? But also, if you can, please respond to the fact that a state which has democratic institutions, let's say Israel, is trying to take decisions on international issues which are dealt by the UN, etc., whether there can be a state of Palestine, whether UNRWA can work in an occupied territory, and whether it can continue to exist. So your views on that too, because several of us here are former UN people, and others are sympathizers of the UN as a global body, I suppose, that we need. Thank you. Gary, please. And please introduce yourself so that I don't do it in the wrong way.
Do you want me to introduce myself?
Please,
Yeah.
because we don't have the usual group here, so others may not know you already.
Yeah, I'm Gary Slutkin. I'm formerly with the World Health Organization, where I ran their epidemic intervention unit. And I'm the founder of Cure Violence Global, which works on violence as a contagious disease, a process, and uses methods of continuous outreach for resolving conflicts, and does its best to avoid matters of blame and judgment, which is a hard thing for the human mind to do. So I have a question for Frank, but also, I guess, for anyone, but specifically to this proposal or anything like it. What would be the way in which, with this proposal or anything else, Israel could feel that it has security guarantees? Let's just take it as the possibility that Israel's primary concern is its long-term, short-term and long-term safety from additional attacks, massacres, missiles from within the region, including Iran. So what would be the, in a way, guarantees or methods that the Israeli society, of which the Knesset is I guess, representative of in some way, would feel comfortable as to their own safety. Let's just imagine that Israel's safety is their primary concern.
Great. Peter, you want to answer? And Frank was also asked.
I will, but I don't think Gary will be happy with what I have to say. First of all, it requires a very big leap or suspension of disbelief to assume that Israel is worried about its security when we're talking about UNRWA. UNRWA, in fact, is one of the pillars of Israel's security because it gives education and other services that otherwise would be provided by Israel's enemies. And it provides an education, a secular education. No, I do not buy for a single second the argument that Israel is doing this because it fears for its security. This is a complete red herring. The argument about the alleged 12 UNRWA attackers, there's never been any evidence put forward, and I know from personal experience that UNRWA is very assiduous in preventing Hamas activities and as far as possible ensuring that it doesn't employ Hamas members or operatives. And that's very difficult in the circumstances of Gaza, but the effort is there. No, it's not about Israel's security. Israel is by far the strongest player here. This is about a rogue nation rampaging through the Middle East, getting away with it, and feeling completely empowered by Britain, America, Germany, and one or two others. They're proceeding recklessly without any consideration, not just for the people for the Palestinians, but for international security. If Israel wants peace, all it has to do, and security, all it has to do is to treat the Palestinians like normal human beings. Perhaps even Gary can understand that. Just treat the Palestinians like ordinary human beings.
If you allow me to just respond to this for a second.
Sure.
I don't think that UNRWA is what Israel is primarily concerned about. I think that they, in a way, like many in the region, are kind of hostage to the overall situation. So I don't even know why that is being brought up as a primary issue, although I understand its importance to the children and to the population. And ravaging through the region, I mean, Israel was attacked by Hezbollah, which isn't even Lebanon, as you know, on October 8th. So it's trying there to, and you could disagree with this as well, to try to get rid of the missiles and maybe some of the higher level individuals. You know, there's 150 or so thousand missiles there and rockets. So they're that ravaging through the region is not the only way of looking at this from the point of view of a small country largely surrounded, and of which we haven't even mentioned Iran yet, or actually Yorgos did in his initial statement. But the idea that Israel is the strongest in the region is also a misunderstanding, and it's not really the way Israel thinks about itself, because both Iran and Turkey have very, very large militaries, and the population of Israel is very small in terms of how many recruits it can even bring into anything, should there be land wars or anything else. So Israel has an idea, maybe, that they're surrounded. And there's a limitation to how long they can carry on even. And also their belief in a continued support from the UK or Germany or France or even the US is less than you think, because betrayal is in their history. So I'm just trying to put forward a point of view of a very small country with a very small population getting missiles from many directions. And the simplistic idea that if they only treated the Palestinians perfectly well, that they wouldn't continue to get attacks, when these organizations and the country of Iran are sworn to their destruction, not just their destruction, Israel, but to the destruction of the Jewish people, without even mentioning of the Palestinian people. Which, I mean, Iran may mention it once in a while, but it isn't the primary idea in the world of Iran that I understand. Now, all of that having been said, I think that we should be talking about solutions, and I'm extraordinarily grateful to Yorgos and also to Frank that we should be talking about solutions, because this is a region-wide issue, at least. Because what in the dickens are some of these groups that are like Hezbollah doing in this region? How is it that it's fine for Iran to have these groups that essentially represent Iran, that are given tens of billions of dollars for their missiles and for the salaries, for the purpose of what? Supporting the Palestinian people? I don't think so.
Thanks. Thank you, Frank. I mean, some very good questions also, of course. But of course, we can see parallels if you want. Who started the chicken or the egg issue? Because everybody thinks and feels encircled and feels to have the right to self-defense without any consideration of perhaps others or humanity eventually. So it goes for almost all parties, or if not all parties in the region.
Correct.
And beyond. But I noticed now that we have, exactly. Thank you. I mean, we have to try to see how we can break through this, and it would be good to also think if the Palestinians say they're used their cause by regional powers to attack Israel, would Israel consider really giving Palestinians their rights, the end to occupation, and creating, because it's a similar people, an ally eventually, I think. I don't know if it's still possible after what happened in Gaza, but I would see the two countries that coexist. Eventually, some people have proposed even a confederation, but once they feel safe between them, the two of them, it would probably be good for Israel also, like Peter said, for UNRWA, instead of having a radical group there, because Palestinians are also sharing the Israeli fate of, or the Jewish fate of being all over the world now. Some of them uprooted, some were because of their will. They were also secular, but now the extremists can have more sway if they feel threatened. Why are we going in the wrong direction, perhaps? That's my sense of missed opportunities, and I think this is another one. Okay, I think Frank was asked, and then Ingeborg, right? Frank was asked directly by Guy, and then Inge, and then Peter. Thank you. And we have Jeff Sachs here with us, and he has limited time. So I don't know, Jeff, if you have to go soon, we'll also give you the floor earlier.
Yeah, I'll leave at just before the top of the hour, so I'd like to listen for a couple minutes, and then I'll come in.
Thanks for joining us, Frank.
Okay, thank you. Well, because you had asked that we introduce ourselves to those who may not know us, I'm the son of a UN peacekeeper, and in 1965 to 1967. As a kid, I lived in the Middle East. I went to school first in the old city of Jerusalem when it was part of Jordan. Jordan had annexed the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And then we lived in Tiberias up in the north, and then we lived in Damascus We left 2 weeks before the Six-Day War broke out, and my father's Irish Army replacement was shot dead in the Golan Heights. So I have a big interest in this part of the world, and I was delighted to have 2 years ago in Baku, in Azerbaijan, moderated a panel of leaders of the Middle East, including Ehud Olmert, who gave a very long explanation as to the efforts he had made in 2008 with Abbas, Abu Mazen, to bring forward the two-state solution, basically offering the Palestinians practically everything they wanted with some minor adjustments, and having already worked out the protocols of cooperation in a number of areas with the Palestinian Authority in terms of aviation, energy, infrastructure, transport and water and things like that. So, of course, the problem was, as Ulmert says, Abbas didn't say no, but he never said yes. And a few weeks later, Ehud Olmert himself was out of power and heading off to jail for 1.5 years on corruption conviction. So the issue, I think, of the Knesset, because somebody said the Knesset reflects Israeli society. No, I do not think that that is true. Israeli society consists of both the Jewish population, 7 million, and a large part of the Arab population who are Israeli citizens, without necessarily getting into the West Bank and Gaza, which are occupied territories. And in fact, if you go back to the time of Chaim Weizmann or even David Ben-Gurion later, it was very interesting that I think it was Ben-Gurion who said the Falahin, the Palestinian Arabs, are our people too. They are the descendants of the Jews of antiquity. They are not necessarily blow-ins from what is today Saudi Arabia. They simply, over time, became Muslim or Christian, largely Muslim today. And therefore, when the Knesset decides it is against the existence of the Palestinian state, I wonder whether it would be feasible someday with a change of political mood in Israel, because there is a dominant extremism at the moment, but there's a very strong secular and slightly leftward faction, or let's say our base in Israeli society, which is just wanting to get rid of Bibi Netanyahu's government and people like Itamar Ben-Gvir and not to be people like that. But they haven't yet got to that point. But would the Knesset consider that since the Palestinians are actually also of the nation of Israel historically, why not just recognize it and let them be? And as Peter has said, extend to them all of the equal rights that they are supposed to have, and which many Israeli Arabs actually enjoy. Up in the Galilee, they can be, I mean, there was the Druze, one of them was a Druze, was acting president of Israel at one point in time. So, I mean, the possibilities are there if Israel preserves its democracy and extends it. But the problem that Gary raises, which is this victim syndrome of Israeli society, speaking mainly of the Jewish part of that society. I'm sorry, but I think that the victims today in this part of the world are the Palestinians, who have been denied since 1947-48 their right to self-determination, both by people like King Abdullah of Jordan at the time, the father of Hussein, who annexed the West Bank and then was assassinated, and by many others. I mean, the surrounding Arab states have not been always the best friends of the Palestinian cause, but the Palestinians themselves have also been deeply divided. And Israeli governments have persistently continued to divide the Palestinians so that they can dominate them and take over the land, Judea and Samaria. So it's a big challenge, but I think that the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, could take a lead in trying to bring forward some kind of a diplomatic initiative, recognizing the various actors within Israeli society on both the Palestinian and the Jewish side who are keen to build bridges and to forge some kind of a joint future, whether passing through the stage of two states to a confederation, or even in the wider sense, as Gary pointed out, that ultimately what you really need is a Schuman Declaration for the Middle East, which leads to some kind of a an eventual Levantine union of states, including Lebanon.
Frank, the Secretary General is persona non grata. I don't know how I can do it in Israel, at least, right?
He doesn't have to go to Israel to talk to people. You can invite them to New York, Geneva, or Vienna.
Okay, good. Just to add that element. Thanks. Thanks a lot, and for your personal take and experiences from there. Ingeborg?
Yes, thank you. I have unstable digital connection, so I've been in and out of this debate, so I'm not sure that I can make a coherent presentation of anything today. Anyway, I think that it is important for us in such a complex situation to get our priorities right. And the top priority, to my mind, should be to get the genocide ongoing in Gaza to stop. And the peace movement internationally is presenting a lot of suggestions and, of course, put a lot of hope in the UN. So what can the UN do under the present situation? And I would go back to the thinking of the Palestinian professor and author Mazin, who in his very interesting book called that the land of Canaan is not divisible, that the land of Canaan should be a country for everybody, whether you are a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew. And I don't believe in the two-state situation as it is presenting itself now. Can the UN go in and have the land of Canaan as a protectorate? Can there be UN peacekeepers there?
I hope she comes back. Yeah.
So,
Ingeborg, you're breaking up.
mm-hmm.
I think you were breaking up the last few seconds.
Okay. So there are many new ways of thinking how the UN can be involved. And I think it is obvious that a country that is not accepting the Secretary General to its land, who is sending UNRWA out, even though they are desperately needed in this situation, do not deserve a place in the UN for the time being. So UN peacekeepers, protectorate, saying that they have to develop a democratic state, because no country anymore can say that we need to be a clean country with ethnic group or religious group or whatever. So we have to think in a more multilateral way than it's presently being done. And we can speak about all the dangers that there are in the Middle East and the difficulties, but I think we have to prioritize peace in Gaza and use all the means possible for that to occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, who is next? Frank, you had your hand from before, I think.
Sorry. No, that's take it. It's down.
Thanks. Peter. Is Peter Ford, can you hear us?
Yes, this group has a particular focus on the United Nations. I think we need to remember that the present emergency is a crisis for the United Nations, as well as for the Palestinians and Israel and the people of the region. The UN is being tested to destruction by Israel's behavior, supported by the United States, Britain, and one or two others. Tested to destruction. Israel is in virtually open war with the United Nations. It openly insults the Secretary General. It blatantly tries to put out of operation a UN agency. It refuses to cooperate with any UN instance. It attempts to undermine the system of international justice by ad hominem attacks on prosecutors and judges. Israel is a pariah on its way to becoming a pariah. And if you don't think that, then ask yourself, how many countries could Benjamin Netanyahu visit right now safely? And I don't mean for his physical safety, I mean for his political safety. He could not visit anywhere except America and maybe Germany. And the United Nations has to rise to this challenge, or it will sink into oblivion. I think the UN as a system must take up the gauntlet and challenge Israel by suspending Israel's membership. This is the way forward.
Thank you. Just a reminder from the apartheid period, right? Apartheid South Africa tried to create the Bantustans and to say that they were different independent countries and to get them to work for Israel, for the Afrikaners and the white minority, but eventually didn't work. And in one country, when apartheid ended, and there was a suspension of South Africa for a period from the General Assembly of the UN, I see more and more similarities in a way. And I know Jeff wants to talk about, yes, Jeff?
Yeah, maybe I'll come in at this point. I think the priority of ending the war, defending international law, and moving on to peace in the region is preeminent. And my own view is that we already have all of the basis for that in dozens of UN resolutions, in the International Court of Justice ruling in July, in the nearly unanimous rhetorical support for a two-state solution in the 140 countries that have already recognized the state of Palestine. The issue is the US. It's not even Israel. Israel has no veto over a state of Palestine. It has no practical veto, no legal veto, no political veto. It is the United States that has the only veto, and the US veto is both the political and military, of course. But my own view is that we should be working for the state of Palestine to be admitted to the United Nations immediately, as was voted last year in the spring by a vote of 12-1 in the Security Council. The United States was the veto. There were 2 abstentions. The ICJ after that ruled that Israel's occupation is illegal, and the UN General Assembly, by an overwhelming majority, called for the implementation of the ICJ ruling, which calls on Israel to withdraw from all occupied territories based on the 4th of June, 1967 border. To my mind, this is actually straightforward, which is recognize Palestine as the 194th UN member state, admitted on the basis of the 4th of June, 1967 borders in line with international law, capital in East Jerusalem, control over the Muslim holy sites. This is the basis of the Arab Peace Initiative for the last 22 years, repeated every single year. I'm just coming from Riyadh, where I spoke with senior Saudi officials. They repeated it again. I'm coming from Cairo 2 weeks ago. They repeated it again to me. I met with Pezeshkian earlier. Iran would be on board, in my opinion. This is the basis for peace. Not to eliminate the state of Israel, because if you go down that road, it may be philosophically right, it may be historically just, it may make perfect sense. Believe me, you're doomed to try that approach. Doomed. The United States will never eliminate a Jewish state, and you can talk forever, but the United States may be pushed into stopping the veto of peace. This is quite a different thing. since the two-state solution is absolutely in every single UN member state the official policy, even the United States, by the way. The only one that opposes the two-state solution is Israel. But this is natural. I believe this has nothing to do with negotiations with Israel. Israel's whole purpose, in my opinion, politically, at least since 1967, but arguably since 1948, has been to oppose a Palestinian state. And all the gobbledygook about who's at fault and so forth, I'll tell you who's at fault. Israel is at fault. It has never wanted for one moment a state of Palestine, and don't think that it is an accident that Olmert was thrown out of office on corruption charges. They're all corrupt, but Olmert was getting close to a deal, so he had to be removed. That's not a coincidence. That's not just bad luck. That's how this game is played. And by the way the game is played is if you look at who runs American foreign policy, Antony Blinken, Amos Hochstein, Richard Pearl, Wolfowitz, Abe Shulsky. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? This is honest brokerage? Come on. This is a game that's been going on for decades. But now there's a genocide going on. Israel's completely out of control. It is a genocidal state. Netanyahu, by the way, is the one that talked the US into the war in Iraq, into the overthrow of Assad, into the war against Gaddafi. Israel's also made a shambles of American foreign policy. And don't think that it isn't. It's Feith and Wolfowitz and Pearl. I know all these people. This has been a game for decades. So there is going to be no, and now, having said that, it's hard to get the US to change position. The US has no principles. It's itself a rogue state. It's not an accident, by the way, that in last week's vote on lifting Cuban sanctions, there were 2 votes, 187 called for lifting Cuban sanctions, by the way, after 65 years. And 2 voted against, the United States and Israel. These are the 2 rogue states of the world right now. And it's not an accident, it's the same foreign policy. But the costs to the United States of this are extraordinary. The Pentagon is not on side. The Pentagon doesn't want Netanyahu's war with Iran. Israel is actually at very serious risk because its Iron Dome is anything but iron right now. It would absolutely be destroyed, by the way, with a full-scale war with Iran. And Israel counts on the United States to start World War III to prevent that from happening. So we're in a very treacherous situation, but I would go with international law and with the votes of the UN and with the fact that there's a process that is well advanced and it's got one state opposing it, and that's the United States. And we should call out the United States for being the single obstacle to peace in the region. I'm putting aside Israel. Israel cannot wage war without the United States, not even one day. Israel cannot block a state of Palestine. It's not about negotiating with Israel. This is about the United States. And so that's my own view. Now, to get this to work, I'm encouraging the Arab states, the Arab League, the Kingdom, Iran, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, to make a specific plan in the next few weeks. They have a plan. It's the Arab Peace Initiative. It was tabled first in 2002. It's been repeated literally every year. It was repeated in Riyadh last year. A year ago, it was repeated in Bahrain this year. It's their plan. Their plan is 2 states, 4th of June, 1967 borders. Okay? They should put forward this plan very clearly, very publicly, so clearly that even the New York Times, that dingbat phony institution, would actually have to print it. would actually have to say it's true, there is someone to talk to on the other side, because that's part of this little game that is being played. But of course there's someone to talk to. 22 Arab states and Iran and 57 states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They're all there to talk to. They've all said the same thing for years. So that is my proposal. I believe that to get this done, Iran should say it's on side, which I believe it is. It should say that in the event that there is a Palestinian state and UN military forces put in to interpose between the two sides, which I think would be important under the UN Security Council, that Iran would agree to end all financial, military, logistical, and other support for Hezbollah and Hamas, and to say that clearly. I think the United States, in return, should say that it lifts all sanctions against Iran and returns to the JCPOA. So I'm in favor of moving forward comprehensively where Iran is not an obstacle, the United States is not an obstacle, the Arab states agree to normalize their relations with Israel, and to my taste, I don't care what Israel says. It's got no legal standing whatsoever in this, to my view. This is a decision for the international community. It is not a decision for Israel. Israel has no veto over the rights of the Palestinian people. And this has been repeatedly expressed by the UN General Assembly in overwhelming measure. So, in short, I want to corner the United States in two ways. One is through full international backing of a state of Palestine, and second, by US public opinion internally, which is pretty much aghast at what Israel is doing, and rightly so. So I think that if we can put the pincers on the US political class and the US deep state to explain this is not in the American interest at all, to be diplomatically isolated, to cut itself off from the whole world, to be the single blockade for peace, to risk World War III with Iran, that this is not in the US interest. I actually think that there's a glimmer of a chance that the United States drops its veto. And by dropping its veto, I think we would proceed to the solution to this. So that's my take.
Thank you. It's quite optimistic and it's a radical character, I think. We have the elections tomorrow. We'll see. I don't know if it makes any difference which of the candidate wins. Really, I'm disappointed with Europe. I wish I could say Europe would put some pressure on the US, because public opinion certainly here is clearly against the genocide, although it's not against Israel, but it's becoming more against Israel as time passes, I think, with this problem. So, but they have no guts, and somehow, and there is also the other war in Ukraine, and they feel threatened by Russia and all this. So there is a multiple puzzle that's not easy to create the positive momentum. But thanks a lot.
Yeah, I apologize, and it's so rude, but it's not meant as rudeness or slight. I literally have an interview in 2 minutes on a...
You had warned me.
That so I do have to go, but if you're interested in following up along these lines at all, count on me. You're an important group, very important group. I think we need to help Antonio, I would say, in this case. This is not an easy situation for him. But I think on this, he has done the right thing repeatedly. He has spoken out. He's spoken out clearly. Being called persona non grata by Israel is a mark of distinction and honor at this moment. It's not in any way a blight or a fault of what he's done. So I think we should support him. But I do think we could get all of the non-aligned countries. We could get the African Union, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Arab League, China, Russia, basically everyone but the United States and a few of its acolytes to support this, because they already do in the General Assembly repeatedly. And so, to my mind, that's where we should put the maximum pressure. Make clear that the United States is the obstacle to peace. not even Israel. Israel is disgusting in my view. I mean, this government is barbarous, but it's not really the obstacle to peace because the United States could stop Israel in a moment. Israel can't do this for one day without the US. So thank you very much. Hope we can follow up.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Jeff.
Bye. Will Antonio go around? I wanted to ask, but Frankie, who is going to go around and make this coalition or whatever and move?
Well, I just wanted to thank Jeff because he knows I disagree with him a lot on Ukraine, but on this whole thing on Israel Palestine, I almost see 99% agree with him, and certainly I would say that, and he and I have exchanged views on this, that the fundamental thing, the real trigger to unlock this situation is to get Palestine recognized as a member of the UN, to get it into the UN. That is the thing. And as he rightly says, the buck stops on the desk in the Oval Office in the White House. That's where the decision can be taken. And hopefully President Harris or President Trump will get to do that, or President Stein. I don't think she's really seriously in the running. But anyway, that's it. I just wanted to thank Jeff. I think it was a very important contribution he just made.
Thank you, but please consider also, we declare the state of Palestine with the 67 borders, and then you have the settlements that have are within those borders, and you have East Jerusalem parts taken away from the Palestinians. What do you do then? You interpose UN troops in such.
I mean, you always have situations where the border alignments are adjusted. I mean, even between India and China, there is not an agreement on the border. Even Israel and Lebanon, there's formally not an agreement on where the border is. So, I mean, this thing, you put it into a boundary commission of some sort and let them work it out. And there can be, like we know with plebiscites for exchanges of territory, Olmert had actually already offered 4% of Israel proper for an equivalent piece of the West Bank to protect the settlements. So all of that can be worked out, but you've got to get Palestine into the UN first.
Thanks. Jan, is that the correct way of pronouncing your name? Yeah. Thanks. You're muted, please. Oh, there you are.
Sorry. Yes, thank you. I'm Jan Hurwich of the Visionary Ethics Foundation in Costa Rica. We're about 50 people focused on human rights and connecting globally. I used to work within the Inter-American system, advising director generals. And then after I retired, I also have been connected to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which is right in my neighborhood. And I agree completely with Jeffrey Sachs. And I think it's important, something that he said at the end, which was, we have to help Antonio Gutierrez. And I think a group like this, at some point, needs to decide how we can be helpful, because having been an advisor to two director generals of IGA, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, I know what it's like, not globally, but within the Inter-American system. I know what it's like on a day-to-day basis. So how can we help? That would be my question to the group.
Thank you. Very practical question. And I think we have experience with the Office of the Secretary General, etc. We can put our minds together. I don't know, go and see Antonio Guterres, ask for an appointment, have a Zoom call with his advisors, make him work. I know that Victor, you have worked with him, or others here have worked with him. Would somebody want to say something? Victor Angelo? You are muted. Sorry for pushing you to talk. You're still muted, yes? Yeah. Oh, there you are.
Now it's okay. Yeah, it's
Yes.
okay. Yeah. Well, good afternoon to everyone. First, a joke to Frank O'Donnell. I'm expecting him to occupy the northern part of Portugal very soon, because his people lived many centuries ago in the northern part of Portugal, and they might have a right to that, to come back, to return. So, Francis, think of that. Remember that your people spend about 500 or 600 years in the northern part of Portugal, and you might have a claim to come back. Okay?
There'll be about 70 million of us.
Yeah, okay. We will try to fit you, and you will leave a small piece of land for us by the sea. We will not call it Gaza, we will call it something else. But we will try to fit in that small piece of land. So that's one thing I wanted to mention as a joke to Frank. Now, on a more serious basis, I fully agree with Jeffrey Sachs. The solution is not in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem. The solution is in Washington. And if we really want to give a piece of advice to the Secretary General, is to tell him to be in touch with the President of the United States and with the leadership of the United States and ask them what is their plan to find a solution to the crisis in the Middle East, because they are the only ones that can find a solution. Talking to the Israelis, talking to Netanyahu, talking to the neighboring countries leads nowhere. If there is a solution, the solution has to start in Washington, has to be decided by Washington. And if they really believe in this two-state solution, they should come up with a plan saying, this is the process we would like to follow to implement that two-state solution. So that's another thing I would like to say. The third thing I would like to say is that there has been some talk within our group about a confederation of two peoples, the Israelis on one side and the Palestinians on the other side, within the same state. That doesn't work. Even in a country like Belgium, where the populations are very similar, the Flemish and the Wallons are very, very similar. The Confederation of Belgium as a confederation, as a unique state, is not working at all. And every year that goes on, we will see that the two peoples in Belgium are more and more separate, are more and more hostile to each other. And I don't think we should insist on the idea of a separation. The only idea is indeed the two-state solution, as it has been several times approved by resolutions by the UN. And the key for that is in Washington. So that's basically what I want to mention, besides the fact that, and that's another point, it's time to think about serious sanctions against Israel. It's time to think about what we have done in other parts of the world, and particularly in South Africa, and adopt the same kind of sanctions, particularly in Europe. And I, as an European, and I'm talking from Lisbon, I am one of those advocating serious sanctions against the state of Israel. And I am one of also saying to the Secretary General, Mr. Secretary General, you should talk about sanctions when a country like Israel behaves the way they behave. So these are my comments at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Thanks a lot. I think that Frank won't take advantage of the original joke, but yeah, we should take advantage of your experience, and we take key points here. If you want to contribute even after this discussion with ideas, we can put together something like a small paper or set of proposals. Yeah, in case it can be helpful. Thanks. Yes, Sotiris. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Jeffrey Sachs gave a very courageous proposal and clear, and was very useful for us. I think we have to stand by our Secretary General and stand by the organizations of the United Nations as much as we can. This is our responsibility. This is number one. The other thing is just a comment about the relations between the US and Israel, and the fact that we see now Netanyahu is pulling United States by the nose. And Netanyahu does his best to have Trump win the elections of tomorrow. And the question is, does the world, the free world, let's call it, will be better off with Trump in the United States and maybe Vance after him? That's another horrible fear. So I think we have to see that in the United States, where I lived for 30 years of my life, there is a very strong Jewish lobby, as you know very well, and which has very big influence in politics, in economy, in culture, in entertainment, and many other areas, very well selected. So how do you deal with that? And Israel knows that there is the lobby in the US and doesn't have to worry very much because it can blackmail the government. So this is what we're seeing now. We see Netanyahu, who without any shame is pulling the United States by the nose. And the question is, how do you deal with that? Support the United Nations. Come out strongly in favor of what the Secretary General has done and the organizations of the UN like UNRWA. And this is the only thing we can do within our abilities. Jeffrey Sachs can say these things, which is very courageous, maybe exaggerating sometimes, but we should have in mind that we cannot get involved with that matter. He is American. We are not. So we are UN people. And this is what is our responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sotiris. We have to see, of course, what happens tomorrow, as it is really close now, the election. But yeah, I hope we can propose and support the Secretary General. But if he were trying a bit harder to do things, not only say things, that's my complaint. But Peter.
Well, I believe it boils down essentially to Jeffrey Sachs's solution or a military solution. And if we're being realistic, I think we have to say that today a military solution, either a victory for Israel or a victory for its enemies, is more likely. I admire Professor Sachs and all his work and his well-intentioned proposal, but I greatly fear that it wouldn't work, that at the end of the day, the United States, any US administration would simply veto recognition of the state of Palestine. And I finish with the mischievous thought, talking of military solutions. Imagine if that Hezbollah drone had found Netanyahu at home in his bedroom. How different today's discussion would be looking, and how perhaps more realistic Israeli politicians might be. Leave that thought with you.
Okay, that's drastic. Yeah, I don't know how much personalities and not the current dynamics of politics in Israel are to blame for this all, but yeah, I suppose Hezbollah was also affected by the killing of its leader. But if we go to this, yeah, an eye for an eye and a leader for a leader or two, right? I don't know. Gary.
Yeah. I think if Netanyahu were hurt or killed, it wouldn't change very much in Israel because there's others. They might feel even more reactive and the need for doing more of what they're doing. I want to go back to what Jeffrey said, which has a lot in it, a lot of positivity in it, and I think a lot of hope. But what I really wanted to ask him, since he seems to be talking with a lot of people in the region directly, is the part about that he mentioned in passing about Iran and the I don't know, the continued arming of these other groups, because that would seem to me to be an essential part of such an agreement. In other words, I mean, I'm just kind of putting myself into the position of the country as a way of Israel or of a citizen there, and how they would feel with arms still coming in to the West Bank as well as into the north. And as you know, their population is really shrunk. I mean, the size of Israel functionally has shrunk because they are under attack as well as attacking. So the whole realm of this conversation I would imagine in their mind be about how the armament situation is around them, from the Houthis to Hezbollah to Hamas. I mean, they're basically running around. Yeah, you can see the destruction in Gaza and all the killing, which is way beyond horrible by any name. But they are spending an awful lot of time and military activity around getting rid of missiles and missile bases and things that protect missiles. This is one way of seeing what they're still finding all kinds of caches of missiles in underground tunnels in Gaza, as well as, in the north and the south and in the suburbs of Beirut. So this part of the equation is a highly relevant equation to Jeffrey's suggestion and proposal, because there are those who would be against a two-state solution, but there's also those who are, I would say, legitimately concerned about the survival of the country with this many missiles and the number of recruits that can come into the south and the east and the north. It's virtually unlimited as compared to what Israel is able to do. So yes, Israel needs the U.S. Without the U.S., it could functionally be destroyed. So this is a, this was said in passing, but I just think it's an enormous part of the equation. And as far as, security goes, I mean, Frank, you know this a lot better than I do. I've only been in the West Bank 2 or 3 times. I mean, it seems like, there's a lot of opportunity from all of these from the West, from the East, and from the South, for missiles and massacres to continue to happen, unless this is set up correctly. And the population, is able to feel that it can relax. Because we're dealing with a lot of trauma on everybody's side, and a lot of fear, and a lot of death, and a lot of expectation of more of it. So the security situation is still relevant, as it is in Europe.
Thanks. Thank you, Gary. Frank?
Well, just to comment on what Gary has been saying. I understand very well the missile threat, and in fact, it was one of the reasons I initially was very reluctant to sign that appeal that went out, and I even had afterthoughts afterwards. But I think it's important to realize that, going after the individual missiles is not as effective as going after the missile pipeline and the source of the missiles. And the best way to remove that pipeline, the missile pipeline, is through recognizing Palestinian dignity and statehood. And no less an authority than a former deputy prime minister of Israel, former brilliant foreign minister, Abba Eban, wrote 25 years ago a book, Diplomacy in the Next Century. And he absolutely was crystal clear 25 years ago that Netanyahu was the only one who, at that time, who did not understand the fundamental importance of resolving the Palestinian issue as the key to peace in the Middle East and the key to Israel's security. So it is in Israel's greatest interest for its security. And I have no doubt that Iran, which has a slightly different regime now than it had not so long ago, and I think Jeff is probably right in saying that the Iranians would turn off the spigot for Hamas and Hezbollah if the Palestinian statehood came into being and a very serious attempt was made to rebuild Gaza, and also to rebuild the great destruction which is taking place in the West Bank right now. Because, as you may know, the Palestinian olive groves are being mechanically torn out of the ground by the settlers and their ilk. So, and the IDF is giving absolutely no security to the indigenous inhabitants of the West Bank. So getting that thing solved, getting Palestine's statehood recognized by integrating it into the UN, and getting back to a peace process, which Netanyahu has ignored for over a decade, getting that back on track within the context of the Arab Peace Initiative is extremely important. All of the relevant Arab states have committed to recognizing and working with Israel as long as the Palestinian issue is addressed. It's easy to forget that, but it's there. It's still on the table, and as Jeff said, right now in Riyadh, he got it reconfirmed. And we know it's there. We know, we've heard from so many other people. I've heard it from 2 former secretaries general of the Arab League, and so I think that's the issue. It is really the critical thing that can make a difference to Israel's security, and not least to Palestinian security and well-being.
I just want to add I believe that this is a possible situation if Harris were to win.
There is an American voter here. You can take that into account.
Yeah, Harris is doing a great job. Simon Harris is the Prime Minister of Ireland. And my wife bumped into him today at a train station.
They use the trains, those Europeans. On motorcades.
Paris meets Paris, the world will be different.
So I think we're getting close to the end. If anybody wants to add anything else, I mean, I think we see that Israel and Palestinian security, Israeli-Palestinian security are so interconnected. They have to trust a bit and have a reset. I don't know how easy it is. Well, suspicions, political interests, corruption, and all that come together, and of course other powers, etc. But if we can have a positive influence, the Secretary General would be an ideal tool to use to bring everybody around this. And perhaps the American election will give a new opportunity, whoever gets elected, to have a fair start. So if you think of any way to do it, yes, Sotiris, yes?
I'm afraid about the American elections, the way it goes. But Mr. O'Connell said something very important about the have Palestine as a member of the United Nations. I think this is something that we can talk about it. We can support that. And something else which the Secretary General could do is to have a trip to Iran. I think it will be important if he wants to take some initiative to be in Washington and in Tehran.
Yeah, good.
Great, yes. Of course, you know, for membership to the UN, there has to be a recommendation by the Security Council where the veto can be used, right? So, yeah. So the SG probably will have to go on his trip and then have a vote, if hopefully that would work. Yeah. Any other comment, suggestion? Yes. Can I hear? Am I hearing somebody? Frank? No.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. Thank you all then. We are going to continue with these Mondays with different topics, but also we can follow up on this particular topic with it's so important. And you can always send us your ideas and comments to info@fox.org. The next session will be on the 18th of November. We've not decided yet on what it will be. It could be about Ukraine if we want to deal with the big peace and security issues. Could be about this place of the UN today. It could be about something about development or climate. So let us know. But on this one, please stay in touch and with each other and with us and through us. If you want to get any contact detail of somebody who is here and you don't have it, let us know and we'll inform them. And yeah, thank you all. And yeah, take care and keep working for the good causes that we are all here dedicated to.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.